And we're on. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Project New Earth. Um, Hello to you, Vincent, as well. Uh,
Thank you.
and welcome to my podcast, which finally made it to the world after so long. You know how long I was procrastinating, and so would you be willing to introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do and whatever
Okay.
you want them to know about you?
Okay. Um, well, my name is Vincent Byrne. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. Um, Grew up here, lived here pretty much all my life, apart from a couple of years when I was in the UK, and started life as an accountant. Did that for about 15 years, and then changed to consultancy,
Hmm.
um, where I worked I suppose, turning businesses around that were failing badly. Um, and then I suppose a couple of things came together. One was in my early 40s, my marriage was breaking up, and I also started to do some psychotherapy, which was around
Hmm.
that. And in addition to that, I also started to have a change in the way that my I was doing my work.
Hmm.
Um, and I started to lose interest in just the business side and was more interested in the people.
Yeah.
So I was helping these business owners turn their businesses around, helping them with the practical stuff. And then I knew as I was walking out the door that they were probably going to do exactly the same all over again.
Yeah.
And I'd seen that happen a few times and didn't really understand it until I started doing my own work and the counseling and psychotherapy. And I started to learn lots of stuff about um, why people behave the way they behave, and including
Yeah.
myself. And so then I started to shift across. I became more interested in it. I became interested in energy therapies and coaching and just any kind of interest at all that could help with how people behaved, hypnotherapy, all that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. And so that really, from that point in my early 40s to now, that's kind of the journey I've been on. And I go in different directions. So I do the podcast with Alexandros Megas
Yeah.
that your mind is trying to kill you. So that's we started that earlier on in the year, and that's he's a shaman and a
Yeah.
hypnotherapist, and so I'm the enthusiastic interviewer in that situation. He's the expert, so that goes
Yeah.
well. And separate to that, I coach people who want to make life changes, but the main way that I earn an income is I still work with business owners,
Hmm.
but this time I work probably 60% on the personal side, um, and maybe 40% on the business side. I still like the business side,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't give it up completely, but I help them move from where they currently are. Usually it's business owners who are maybe 5, 6 years in business. They've created something and they're really stuck in the business doing all this work, and they need help to start to turn it into a system so that they can have the business working for them rather than they working for the
Yeah.
business. And so that's where most of my work is done. Uh, During the lockdown and all the stuff last year, I started to build a new program, a mastermind program, which I run. I have two mastermind groups that I run in person. They haven't run in the past year, but normally they do, and they're for business
Yeah.
owners who come together and talk out each other's problems, and I help them with that. So I decided I was going to create some online ones. So I'm in the process of building that at the moment.
Hmm.
Um, when we met on London Real, I was starting to think about what to do, but I didn't quite know what I was going to do. But I've ultimately made my decision, and I'm now in the process of building that. So that's what I'm doing. And but I'm also working with clients as well, using a lot of Zoom and Teams and all that sort of stuff at the moment. So while the initial lockdown kind of killed my business, and then after about 4 or 5 weeks, it took off again because people were happy to do Zoom stuff. So that's what I do. That's what I do. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's
A mixed.
looks like you have quite a lot of experience in many areas. Were you
Yeah.
self-taught and in the areas of like psychology and hypnotherapy and all that, or?
I did
Hmm.
courses. I didn't do formal degree type
Yeah.
courses, but I did courses. So, 4 or 5 day courses, weekend retreats, this kind of stuff. Um, and obviously, I learned a lot
Yeah.
in when I was going through. I mean, I probably went through about 3 to 4 years of counseling and psychotherapy
Uh-huh.
myself. And then I did a number of coach training courses. And so I did two initially, and then just last year I did another one, which kind of was a slightly different direction that took. And actually, recently I've just done a course on being a tiny habits. I don't know if you've read the book,
Tiny.
but Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg.
Uh-huh.
He was doing an accreditation for trainers there, so I just did that as well. So I'm always interested in that and learning. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
and you said that before because I didn't know that, and I was gonna ask you what did you do before you start your current business, but you said you were an
Yeah,
accountant.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't actually go to college. I went straight in. There was two ways you can do it. One, you can go straight into an accountant's office and then study the professional exams at night.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. So at 18, after I did sort of the equivalent of high school, I went in and worked in an office for 5 years. Took to
Hmm.
qualify, and I then worked in that for about 10 years after that. I was in an office, a professional office, and then I moved out and worked in industry. So I worked with some multinationals and then small Irish businesses as well.
Hmm.
So, and then I decided I wanted to work for myself, and age about, I think it was about 31, 32, I started working for myself. I didn't want to do accountancy as in tax and all that
Hmm.
stuff. I wanted to do the stuff which helped people run their businesses better. So that's where I started.
So it wasn't by the age of 40 then you decided to change, but before that, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I went from accountant to it was probably you could call it business
Uh-huh.
consultant. But in the middle of that, I had a company which was it was we used to part of what we did in our consulting was we used to implement accounting
Hmm.
systems. So we took on the distribution of a South African accounting software package. Um, and we did that for a few years, and then we sold it
Hmm.
back to the company. And I went to work in the UK to set up the business for them over in London.
Uh-huh.
So I spent about 18 months over there building the business for
Hmm.
them. And then I came back after that and set up on my own again. So
Hmm.
that
And
was it. So
how how did you decide to, although I kind of have I assume what would be your answer, but what how did you decide to switch from accounting to helping people, and then to even get deeper into the not just helping the people's businesses, but get into the personality and all these
yeah, I suppose the training that I did when I was trained to be an accountant, I probably spent 4 of the 5 years working in the area of business insolvency, and so essentially businesses that were going into liquidation
Mm-hmm.
or receivership or whatever the equivalent would be with yourselves. So essentially, the business is dead, and they have petitioned the court, or some creditor has decided that they want to take control of the business, or they want to, push it um, push it to the wall in
Mm-hmm.
effect, shut it down. So as a liquidator or receiver, I was working for one of those, and we would go into the businesses and we would try and save it. So we would try and either keep it going and then sell it,
Mm-hmm.
or we would try and save it, rationalize things and make things a bit better, and then maybe sell it back to the
Mm-hmm.
original owner. So I did that for 4 years, and because I was doing that, I wasn't really doing the normal boring number crunching that
Yeah.
you do in accounting. So I always had the sense that that was the side of things that I really enjoyed. So I never liked tax or auditing or all that
Mm-hmm.
usual office stuff. Um, and then when I left that, I went out working in industry. So I was inside the business, understanding what was going on. So again, I liked that side of it. Um, the reason I decided to get out of it was I was tired of working for other
Mm-hmm.
people, and I just had a thing that I wanted to have a go myself.
Yeah.
Not really clear on what that looked
Yeah.
like. Um, so I just stopped one day out of the business I was in, and started on my own and went from there. So gradually kind of built it and built it. And then we, as I said, deviated into the software, and then I came back. It was really just following opportunities as they came up. That was really it.
Mm-hmm.
The shift from um, the shift into the helping the people, the person, as it were, came for it came about because I was curious as to why people kept making the same mistakes that they had made before,
Yeah.
and that was in the business
Mm-hmm.
context. Um, and and I knew nothing really about psychology at that stage. So when, as I said, my marriage was breaking up, I decided that the best way to deal with it and to understand what was going on was that I should go and get counseling and talk to a therapist. So that's what I did, and I have written a book which is very drafty, but the working title is "I Knew Nothing Until I Was
Uh-huh.
40,"
Yeah.
because every session I went to, I learned something that I had never heard of
Yeah.
before. Um, Obviously, it's almost 20 years ago, so the extent of the use of the internet at that stage was pretty
Yeah.
low, and so I wouldn't have been, you know, online checking stuff out. So really, it was those sessions every week that I would go in and I'd learn something new. And sometimes it was relating to my marriage that was falling apart, and sometimes it was relating to a business problem that I had, and I'd go in and talk about, why that had
Yeah.
happened. So I learned a lot over that time, and after that, I again, just different opportunities presented themselves. One of the things I found about counseling was that you you probably found out what was going on and maybe why it was going on and tracing it back to your childhood, but they didn't really have a fix for it as to how you would sort it out.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when I started to look at things like energy therapies,
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis, um, because even though I didn't quite realize at that stage, I now know that this was programming
Yeah.
that I had gone through when I was a kid, and I needed some kind of some tool to deprogram or change the programming. I didn't quite have the words for it at that stage, but
Yeah.
I knew it was something like that. So that's why I went down those routes. So I went in different directions, and the more I went down the rabbit hole, the more things I learned and the more experiences that I had. So yeah. That was
And
that
the
was
the
it.
therapy, did I get it right? The therapy was after the marriage problem and the
It was probably about 6 months before, like the problem had
mm-hmm.
been there, and then I probably started going to therapy 6 months before we actually
Uh-huh.
split up. So it was very useful to help me navigate the breakup. And I had three
Mm-hmm.
kids at that stage, so trying to deal with all of that too. So yeah, it was helpful for that, but it wasn't really helpful in terms of me being able to change the behaviors that had maybe brought me into the position in the first place.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's still something that not many people do, to actually decide to go to therapist, because I don't know, maybe they think that, oh, it's a shame or something, that you're going to a therapist.
Yeah.
It's like you're something's wrong with you, or it's because it's not like all of us don't have something that's wrong.
Oh, no,
I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think one of the things the therapist said to me, that men in particular are not very good at this
especially,
kind
yeah,
of thing. And normally what happens, she said, is that they jump out of one relationship into another one, and then maybe another one. And then it's about 4 or 5 years later when they have the breakdown.
yeah,
Whereas women tend to have the breakdown, and they deal with it, and then they're able to move on more fresh, more clear from there.
yeah,
Whereas men aren't very good at it. And then women typically have friends that they
yeah.
talk to, so there's a certain amount of therapy going on there. Whereas men don't
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
we
this stuff.
just keep it for ourselves.
Exactly,
Yeah, and it's
exactly.
funny because recently I spoke with someone about exactly about that. That usually when men break up with women, they just try to replace the person with a new one
Yeah,
without even getting the chance to have a closure and actually get that, out of their life and their system, so they can move on healthily to the next one. And the
yeah, yeah.
women are not like that, because usually they need that time for, you know but yeah, the difference, the many differences between men and women.
Oh,
Yeah,
completely, completely, complete. And then there's also the society thing. I mean, you mentioned the shame
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Like there's that too, and the idea that you might go to a counselor, um, or a therapist. Like people, yeah, they think you've got some kind of mental
yeah.
problem. And then you're wondering about what they might think
Yeah,
about you going to a therapist. So people don't do it. So yeah, I tell all my clients that they should go, and like even spend a period of time working with a therapist, because it's a very different dynamic than working with a coach.
yeah.
Even though a lot of coaches will stray into that
Hmm.
area, um, I prefer not to, because typically they're engaging me because it's related to their
Hmm.
business. And so when we hit an area that I know that their behavior is impacting the business, but probably also impacting their home life and relationships, I say go to a therapist.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, and but in your work with clients now, what do you find most challenging?
um, I suppose the thing that I've always found is that people want you to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Um, and that in itself isn't challenging, because I know that that's what they're
Hmm.
going to do. But it takes a while to bring them from a place where they realize that I'm not there to fix the problem. I'm there to help them fix the
Yeah.
problem. And so, like usually they will talk to me about individual. Like they'll say, I can't hire good people. I can't find good
Hmm.
people, and they'll have hired and fired 10 people in the previous year. And you'll say, why did you do that? Why did you hire them? Why did you fire them? And you'll see that they didn't spend any time preparing when they were
Hmm.
hiring. And they'll have probably been doing 20 other things in the day, and then somebody will be at the door for an interview, and then they'll go, oh, okay, I must have, where's that CV,
Yeah.
and last minute
Hmm.
stuff. So they make decisions without really properly preparing.
Yeah.
And then when they bring the people in, they don't actually train them properly.
No.
They don't give them any kind of induction at all, or an instruction as to what they expect from them. And then a few months later, they say, oh, that guy is useless and I want to get rid of him. And they
Yeah.
get rid of them. And they don't particularly understand the fact that actually they're the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we see
Uh,
that quite often with that exact thing
yeah,
that you're talking about. And in so
yeah,
many big and small and companies everywhere. I've been in companies like that that they just throw you in there and just you have to do this and that and yeah and that's it and they just throw you in there and they don't even tell you how to do it and if you're not doing it properly, of course they get angry and
yeah.
it's a it's a kind of not really logical but
No, it's not. And it's down to the fact that I think it's relative, and this might sound odd, but it's easy to launch a business because usually you've got a product or you've got a service and everything is hectic and manic, and the main thing is to try and get some sales going. So there's a lot of effort that goes into that piece, and then you tend to fix the problems as they come up because it's small and you kind of can manage it. And if you bring in one or two people to help, then you can overcome issues. But there's a point in a business, and there's no specific stage when this happens, in terms of years or any of that. It depends on the business itself. But there's a point at which you need to stop and say, hold on, if I keep going like this business is going to be the same in 3 years, 5 years
Mhm.
time. I need to now stop, look and see what systems do I need to put in place. Um, what procedures do I need to put in place? How can I ensure that everyone that I hire is going to do the job that I want them to do?
Mhm.
And you have to step back and think about that, and you have to kind of map out the flow of what you want to happen in the business, and then you have to document it, and then you train people to do it. And if you take the time to do that, then you will build the foundations of a really strong business, and you can really go on from there, because once you have those procedures done, you can keep training people to do it, and you don't have to actually be in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But people, when you talk to people about this, they say, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And so they want to spend their time in the day-to-day manic, reactive, answering the phone, dealing with client problems. They just want to stay doing that because they believe that they have to keep doing it. Whereas if all they did was give 1 hour a day to gradually, writing up a sheet, creating a template, doing a form, small
Yeah.
stuff, um, over a period of time, they would have built out what they need in order to train everybody else to do it. So it's um, it's a mistake that pretty much everyone makes, and when you actually get to the point that you try to help them with it, the biggest problem is trying to get the business owner to spend the hour doing the piece of work that they need to do to actually write up the
Mhm.
procedures and do the stuff. They keep lapsing back,
Yeah.
and yet they complain, I'm stressed, I have to come in and work weekends, all this reactive stuff has them really worked up and worried about the business, and yet they won't take the steps to actually put the fundamental building blocks in
Yeah,
place.
they missed the
So
opportunity to actually build a foundation with the people in the beginning. So
yeah,
when later when they have more people coming, they don't have to be the one to actually teach the new people, and that can be transferred to
Absolutely.
somebody else, and many other stuff as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the best example of it is if you were to and the way I normally is illustrated when I'm doing a presentation is that if you imagine that you had a shopkeeper on one side of the street and a shopkeeper on the other side of the street, and the guy who is really busy will come in early in the morning and he'll work on at the counter and he'll serve all the people and he'll go home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night after the shop closes, but he'll have done stock taking and reordered and all that sort of stuff. And he'll keep doing it and doing it, and he'll get to a point where he's making a decent amount of money. And then on the other side of the street, the guy who has a similar shop, he works like that for a while, but then he starts writing down what he's doing.
Hmm.
So he writes down what he does when he's reordering from suppliers, and he'll write down what the procedure is to do a stock take, and he'll write down how he wants people to greet customers and write all these things down. And then what he can do is he can bring, a student or a part-time person in for a few
Yeah,
hours. He has the material to
like a
train them.
manual.
And
Yeah,
yeah, manual, yeah. He starts to teach them to do it. And then once he's got them in, then he can bring someone else. And so he gets to a position where he may not be earning as much himself as the guy across the
hmm,
street, but now he has two, three people in there. They're running the store. He's only
yeah,
overseeing it, and yet he's earning a decent salary for doing it. Not as much as this guy. So then the opportunity that gives him is that he can either expand the store
hmm,
by getting more space and bringing in more people, or he can open up another
hmm,
store, in which case he can bring his manual and probably one of the staff that he has trained already and put them straight into the new store,
yeah,
and then they can start operating again. So now you have the manual, and this is the way
yeah,
McDonald's
yeah,
works. I
exactly,
mean,
yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. And so if you think like that, then you will build it. It's a little bit
Hmm.
slower, and you probably will have to sacrifice some of what you earn in the early
Yeah,
stage. But once you get the first one up and running, you can then expand very easily and very quickly because you have the manual and you've got the training method and you're there stepping back and it's all
yeah,
just happening. Whereas the other guy is still working away. He's probably now not earning as much as the guy who has four
probably, yeah.
shops.
I w-
And he's afraid to get sick.
yeah.
He's afraid to take holidays. He probably has to shut the store if he has to go on
Hmm.
holiday. And that's the big issue because the other point is that if somebody approaches you to buy the business, if you're like the guy who is in the store and there's only
Hmm.
him, then the value of your business will be significantly less than the guy who has even the one or two stores that he's not in,
Yeah.
because they can literally buy the store, take over the staff, and give you the money, and you just go off into the
Yeah.
sunset. So you see that all the time as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the one who actually writes everything down with the menu and the people and all that, in a way he has his door opened for expanding, and whilst the other one is like
Yeah,
limited, and he has to be there all the time. And it's like in the book of Robert Kiyosaki, that he's talking about the small business, and the what's the difference, between the
yeah, yeah,
rich dad and the poor dad.
yeah. And it's another expression that people often use is working in your business and working on your
Yeah.
business. So when you're making your notes, you're working on your
Hmm.
business. You obviously, when you get started, have to work in
Yeah.
it until you get to the point. But you have to know, not that you have to know where the point is, but you have to know that if you want to get free from the trap, as it were, I call it the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial trap. If you want to get free from that, you have to actually put the effort into creating the systems. And then once you've written them up, you then have to um, you have to be happy to give people
Hmm.
responsibility, and you have to let them make mistakes as well as train
Yeah.
them. Because one of the other problems with business owners is a lot of them are
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
freaks. So nobody can do it as well as me,
Yeah.
and as a result, they micromanage and all that. So that's another challenge to get them to change on that.
Yeah, which is mainly a personality trait. Because if they're usually like that with everything else, probably.
Yeah, yeah, there is that. There is that. Yeah, but often most of them you can get them to move to your way of thinking when you show them that it's okay. You know, it's almost like you got to hold them by the hand and you gradually bring them along and you show them how it's possible to delegate. And then when they see that the person is doing the job properly, they go, oh, okay, okay. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Uh,
yeah. Um,
in what about if, in your opinion, what's the most challenging part of just starting a new business, like from scratch, from.
um, probably it's probably knowing, like spending the time to actually understand what all the bits are that need to be put together. I mean, often people just focus on, I have an idea, I'm going to jump online and I'm going to build a website, or I'm going to go whatever, put a store on Facebook or something like that. Um, and and often the way you hear people like Gary V, whatever, who are talking about this, and I'm a big fan of him. I like a lot of what
Hmm.
he says, but they often make it an awful lot simpler than it
Yeah.
actually is. And not that it's supposed to be complicated, but it's just that you really need to understand what your responsibilities
Hmm.
are. Because if you decide you're going to do this and you set up a limited company, for example, there are legal obligations that go with that.
Hmm.
And if you don't maintain your books and records properly, you could be prosecuted. And in Ireland, it's a criminal
Yeah.
offence if you don't do it. If you don't set up and operate properly from a tax point of view, um, that's also a criminal
Hmm.
offence. So you can be stepping into a lot of areas that are, if you just did a bit of research and spoke to someone who does know what they're talking about, you could probably have a list that you could prepare before you start. And while it's really important to get your product and get out there and talk to people about it, etc., it's also really important to ensure that you're putting the right structure behind you. And I don't just mean the manual and all of
Hmm.
that. I mean just the basic legal procedures and making sure that one of the big mistakes I see people make is that they don't open a business bank
Hmm.
account. So they'll have a bank account which will be their personal bank account, and then so there'll be money coming in from the business into their personal bank account, and obviously they'll be then spending money on groceries and whatever out of
Yeah.
that. And really, you need to have a separate bank account, whether you have a limited company or you're a sole trader. You really should have the two
Hmm.
separate, because now you're saying that's my business, that's my personal. And if I need to transfer money from one to the other, I can do
Yeah.
that. But keep it clean is the best way, because if you've to try and untangle it later on, that can be very time consuming. Or if you want to get someone else to do it, it can be quite expensive to
Yeah.
do. So Um, so I think that certainly thinking through the setup and understanding your obligations and responsibilities is an important thing. Um, I think the other side, when it comes to selling and trying to get yourself out there, I think the only thing that I've ever found works is
Hmm.
persistence. Just keep going. You just have to keep going, regardless of the knockbacks. You just have to keep
Yeah.
going. Um, Too many people, they look for um, quick fix solutions.
Yeah.
So someone comes online and says, I have the perfect system to get
Yeah.
you from, you know, and people buy a lot of those and waste a lot of money on them.
And and
Yeah.
that's the case with many other areas that people want something in a snap of a finger, like just as quick as possible. Just give me the quickest version, the quickest, if I with
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah. How can I get abs in two
Yeah.
weeks?
And can I get if he or she has been neglecting their health for, let's say, 40 years, and now they suddenly want for a month to be healthy and to feel amazing and have the best body in their life. Like that's not
Yeah.
really how it
Yeah.
works.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. So, but I think we're conditioned, and I mean, Alexandros and I talk about this on the podcast. There's a lot of conditioning from
Oh yeah.
advertising and the media generally around the idea that you can do everything from look beautiful to, make a lot of money or whatever if you just take this pill or if
Yeah.
you just, read this book or whatever. And we're conditioned to do that. It's been we've been fed it since radio and television has been in
Yeah.
existence, and the internet has continued
Oh
it as
yeah.
well. So
If not
yeah,
even more than before. But
sure,
uh,
yeah.
did you find that the things that you mentioned hardest for you when you were starting your business? Like what did you find the most challenging for yourself?
The most challenging for me was to when I started off, I was doing consultancy work, and just going and asking people for business was something that I'd never done
Hmm.
before. Um, I was good because I was coming from an accounting background. I knew all the legal stuff and I'd everything in place, but I hadn't got any business.
Uh-huh.
So, so the hardest for me was to go and ask, and the easiest place for me to go was people that I knew that I'd worked with before.
Hmm.
Um, and I suppose it was a good lesson in maintaining good relationships with people, because when you're starting off, a lot of people want to help you if you know
Yeah.
them. So I was lucky in that respect, that even though I was quite at that point I was probably quite shy.
Hmm.
um, I found that part I found that part quite difficult. And then the other piece was the idea of selling time for money.
Hmm.
Um, that was there were I made a lot of mistakes with that, because I was pricing on an hourly rate or a daily
Hmm.
rate, and I would adjust the price down because I thought that was what was important to get the
Hmm.
job. And I realized afterwards that that wasn't an issue at all. But I left a lot of money on the table because I quoted too low a price because at the start I wanted to get, the
Hmm.
business. So that was a problem, certainly. But interestingly, when I got into the software business, which was about 4 years afterwards, and I was going around, this was back in the day when you used to have the small little 3.5-inch diskettes,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and the software would come. There was about 10 discs, and you'd have a box with a manual and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And we were going around selling this. I actually found it easier to sell the box of
Uh-huh.
software, but when I went back to selling my services, it was always much more difficult.
More difficult than.
More
Uh-huh.
difficult, yeah. So it was like as if this is a separate thing to me. So I
Yeah.
was able to sell it and talk about it and all of that stuff. But when it came to talking about yourself as to why you're the right person to do this job, I would just clam up, wouldn't be able to say it until I learned to do that a little bit more easily. Um, but still, I still wouldn't be great at doing it, and I've been very fortunate that usually I get work because other people either I've worked for them and they refer me, or or they've heard of the work that I've done, and they heard good things. So then it becomes an easy conversation when they're coming from that
Yeah.
place. So it's been interesting trying to get ready for a business online where you've got to think about marketing to kind of make the ground kind of fertile, and build a following
Yeah.
before you start putting an offering in front of
Hmm.
people. Um, that's been an interesting learning curve for me over the past couple of years as I've had to do that. So that's been interesting to
So
do.
so basically offering your services was the hardest part. Learning
Probably,
to do it, like, without any,
yeah,
I wouldn't call it, maybe anxiety, or not, like, not even that, like.
yeah, yeah. No, it was, it
And I do
was,
understand that,
and the
because
thing,
I'm very similar, like when I have to offer my services, like even when I have to say a price,
mm,
I'm even many times afraid to say too much, or am I saying enough, or all those.
yeah,
It's, yeah.
yeah. And that what I discovered about that is that's for me anyway, that was about me trying to control the situation.
Hmm.
Um, and because if I felt that I could anticipate what the potential buyer, what price he might actually buy at, then I would, maybe quote that price. So that was probably a discount on what I actually wanted to charge. But I was doing it in order to try and manipulate him into doing what I wanted him
Hmm.
to do by me dropping the
Yeah.
price. Um, so what I learned to do after that was to be clear about whatever I was offering, to try and make it more of a packaged product, even though it was a service, and then have a fixed price on it.
Hmm.
So if somebody came in, they would say, I want to work with you. And I would then be able to say, okay, that'll be 6 sessions, and 6 sessions of 1 hour each will be, 1,000
Hmm.
euros or whatever. Um, and that was all done up as it was almost like I had a sheet with it there. So it's much easier to do it. It's like as if you're talking about something else,
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
yourself. Um, so I learned a few little kind of techniques like that. And then the other idea, because one of the things that I used to do, which was wrong, which was once I would get some business, this was when I was doing the consulting. Once I would get some business, I would go, oh, thank God I don't have to do any more selling for a while. And I would go and I would dive into doing the work,
Yeah.
and then I would do the work, and then as I came towards the end of the project, I would then have to start thinking about maybe selling some
Yeah.
more to get another bit of business. And I was going this just step by step by step. When as what I should have been doing was continually, pushing my name out and having conversations with people on the basis that, you know, you can't control when people are going to buy.
Yeah.
So you're better off having your as many options out there as you possibly can. And then if three people that come at once, you can say, well, I can only do one, so I'll choose this one, the one that's going to give me the
Yeah.
best price. But that took me a long time to learn that one.
So would you say it's better to have, like, a, let's say, for lack of a better word, a menu, what your services are, so you don't have to think too much about, how should I present my service, how much, how long, and all these other things.
Yeah. Yes, is the short
Hmm.
answer is yes. And the menu ideally should be designed to fix a
Hmm.
problem. So if somebody comes and says, I have this issue with my business, I will say, okay, here's the process that we will go through to to address it. You need to do this work. We will have sessions, say 6 sessions to do it, or it could be 10, whatever. Um, and um, and that price
Hmm.
is this, and that's it. Whereas what I was doing was I was going in and I was doing. It was a little bit like I was going in and doing projects which were I was like a part-time finance director
Hmm.
here, or you know, a part-time CEO here, and it was done on the basis of a daily
Hmm.
rate, which would just continue. And so there was, I wasn't solving any particular problem. I was just available to do what needed
Hmm.
to be done. And the problem with that is that you're just an
Yeah.
employee, except you have no benefits.
Yeah.
So they're paying you on a contract basis, but they don't have to pay you for holidays, don't have to pay if you're sick, don't have to pay any insurance.
Uh,
Um, so that's what I was doing, and that was the mistake at the start.
mhm.
When I turned it around and said I will do a monthly, let's say a monthly accounts package, and I will produce, a set of management accounts for you each month, and the management accounts pack will include these documents,
Mhm.
and for that I'm going to charge you 3,000 euros.
Mhm.
And it meant that they were able to see the full value, and I was able to say, well, I can get that done in about 4 days, which means that I'm getting a, 700-800 euro a day rate if I'm looking at
Mhm.
it that way. But when I got up and running and I had done it a few times, I was actually getting it done in 2 days,
Yeah.
but the price was still
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Exactly.
So when you had the package done, it meant that it was based on outcomes and not based on your time. So so the menu is a good way of doing it. But as I said, the menu needs to be. People will always buy because they want something specific. They don't actually want to hire an accountant. They don't want to hire a. They don't even want to hire a personal trainer.
Yeah.
What they want is the results of working with a personal
Yeah.
trainer or the results of working with an
Mhm.
accountant. So if you give them a price and say, well, a normal in a normal individual of your size and weight, and if you follow the
Mhm.
plan, then in 10 weeks you should be here.
Yeah.
So you should have your measurements should be here, and you should have put on weight, and you should have body fat of
Mhm.
17% or whatever it might be, um if you follow the
Yeah.
plan. And if you follow the plan, and the sessions that I will charge you for, that's how much it will be. So now you're actually selling an outcome,
Mhm.
provided they do the work,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a different scenario to just working with a personal trainer on an ongoing basis, and there's no real outcome in it.
Yeah. 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 Makes sense. Um.
Yeah. And that's the same with the accounting thing or any other thing. Will you do my tax return? Yes, it'll be 1,000 euros to do the tax return. Doesn't matter how long it takes. That's what it is. You win some, you lose some, but overall,
Mhm.
you win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have something that you don't really like to do, and you do it every day anyway, like currently or even before? Or...
I probably I probably don't like meditation.
Really?
I it's I find it like some days I will go in and the head is all over the place, and I know this is the way it works, but it's like I'm kind of one of these people who needs to know how to do something, and I'm never happy until I'm doing it
Uh-huh.
well. So meditation by its nature is not something that you ever get on top of. There's
Yeah.
always you can sit down, you can do it. Um, and I find it frustrating at times. And often I'll stand up after 15 minutes and I go, what was the point of that? Whereas other times I'll do it and you'll have gone to a place where you'll have, drifted off and all that.
Yeah.
I still do it. I have seen and read enough to know that even if it doesn't seem to be working, that it's still of benefit that you
Hmm.
do it. But yeah, that's probably the thing. Yeah.
Huh, yeah, that's because yeah, I heard somewhere a saying that's a shallow meditation is always better than no meditation at all. Because yeah,
Yeah.
there are some
Yeah.
days which I find that myself as well that even 2 minutes after sitting down, I'm already
Yeah.
somewhere else, and there are other days or in the afternoon because I do most of the time two meditations a day. Sometimes the afternoon is more chaotic and your mind is everywhere and
Yeah.
it looks like that it doesn't have the same benefit as the morning one, for example, but
Mm.
apparently it's that's not the case.
Mm. I recently started, well, a few weeks ago, because I have this ongoing problem with blood
Hmm.
pressure. And despite my diet having sorted that out, and despite the fact that I exercise and I'm not really overweight, I still have this ongoing problem, and I refuse to take medication for it.
Yeah.
So, but I started a few weeks ago doing a thing called transformational breath
Hmm.
work, and it it it's a little bit like the Wim Hof kind of breathing in that it is a kind of fast,
Hmm.
but it's not probably not as aggressive as the Wim Hof breathing, because there he's actively trying to oxygenate, and
Yeah.
all that. This is more you're breathing into the belly, but you're not breathing out too much.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I found after doing a few sessions of that, now I've done a few sessions guided with a
Hmm.
practitioner, um, and that when they do it, they actually take you into where you use your fingers to press on
Hmm.
acupuncture points, and that starts to release repressed kind of memories and emotions and stuff. But you practice doing it yourself, and I found when you do even 2 or 3 minutes of that I've found myself getting into a very relaxed place,
Hmm.
and then I do the meditation straight after
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So it's been a much better experience as a result of
yeah.
doing it.
Because
Yeah,
of the breathwork, right?
yeah, because the breath work. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've tried. I was doing the Wim Hof stuff for a certain amount of time every day, and I noticed like a really strange feeling right after that. It's like you're uh, I I don't know even know how to you know define it or anything, but you definitely feel something in your head that something is different. It's like it's like a high
mm,
in a way, some kind of high,
yeah,
like you get a buzz
absolutely.
from it,
Yeah,
and even like a bit of an energy surge and like a clear head in a
yeah.
way.
I mean, did you ever do any like the exercises like after it? I was doing 60, 70 press ups
No, I didn't
after
do those. I
like
was doing just.
doing the breathing. You did the breathing and then straight down, and I was doing it. And I would like I got like I probably could do about 15 or 20
Hmm.
normally, but after doing this, I was up 40, 50, 60, 70. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's it.
Uh, and you get this kind of tingling in your fingers
Yeah.
and in your
Hmm.
lips. My son has done free diving,
Uh-huh.
and the breathing that you do to oxygenate the blood before you go and free dive. It's actually quite similar.
Yeah, it makes sense because after that, you know, I think I've reached maybe like three 3 minutes or something like that, which
Yeah, it's pretty
which
good.
was and it wasn't. I didn't need it much of a practice to actually get to that point, and I and usually I've tried to hold my breath for just and I
Yeah,
barely
yeah,
can hang up like a minute or barely.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when I saw
yeah,
the
yeah,
clock just going 2 minutes, 2:15, 2:30, 2:45, I was like, "What's what's going on here?" Like, it's it's
yeah,
crazy. But apparently it
yeah,
works. Yeah, apparently,
yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Well, the apparently the whole background to breath work now on the western side was it started in the 60s when people who'd been taking LSD and various drugs, but I think mostly
Mm-hmm.
LSD. Um, when that was
Yeah.
banned, they started doing breath work as an alternative way of getting a
Yeah.
high.
Uh huh. Oh,
Yeah. So that's where a lot of these came
I
out of.
wonder who
Yeah.
came up with that. With that, I mean, how did they knew that that's the effect that they're gonna reach with the breath work?
Yeah.
Because nowadays it's
Yeah.
it's widespread that you can actually reach a state of an actual trip state and release of DMT and all those stuff. But back then,
Yeah.
I wonder how who was the genius who came up with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you another thing. If you could if you could go back now, and would you, knowing what you know now, would you change anything in your path, in everything that
Um, I suppose I probably wouldn't. When I was in school, I wanted to be an
hmm
architect. I didn't particularly know why. I wasn't exposed to a huge amount of, building design or any of that sort of stuff. But I just had a sense that I liked kind of structure. I used to draw a bit, and it was always very structural
hmm
thing stuff. Um, and I had a sense that I wanted to do that. But when I was coming up to the end of my studies, it was around about 1979,
hmm
80. And my dad, who was in the building trade, um, sort of said, "Oh, there's not great jobs for architects. There aren't huge, there aren't great opportunities
hmm
around." And that was back in the day when, you did a course to get a job. It was all very linear what you
yeah.
did. So the idea that I might go and do a course which was 5, 6 years long, and then come out at the far end and maybe not get a job out of it, um, sort of made me think twice, and that's why I went with accountancy because I hadn't even studied accountancy in
hmm
school, so it was a kind of an odd one to pick. Um, so I probably would go into something that was more about design and creativity, knowing what I know now and knowing that my inklings back then were probably right because
Yeah.
I listen to loads of design podcasts. I read lots of design
hmm
books. Um, and so that was probably there. Um, After that, probably not. I mean, I think like my eldest son is 28, 29 at this stage,
My
and
age.
he knows he knows all the stuff that I didn't learn until I was 40
Uh-huh.
plus,
Yeah.
um, because he's got access
Yeah.
to it, and so it's not something that I could have done, but certainly I would like to have known earlier the stuff about myself and understanding myself and how to change my behavior. Um, I think I would certainly have liked to have known that, because I think it would have taken me in a different path if I'd have known why I did what I
Yeah.
did, what my programming was. Um, because like I found, for example, when I came out of the marriage and I started dating again, I was meeting people who probably had quite similar characteristics to my ex-wife.
Yeah.
And it was only through the counseling and looking at that that I realized that I was actually the one who was initiating that. I was kind of looking for characteristics in someone
Hmm.
because that was my programming. And those characteristics weren't necessarily the characteristics that I wanted, because they were giving me people who I wasn't going to be
Yeah.
compatible with. Um, so so when I became aware of that and just changed what I was looking for, then everything
Yeah.
changed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So having that kind of knowledge, I think is really valuable in whatever area it's in. Um, I remember having a conversation with the counselor. I went for a particular contract, and it was to stand in as a finance director a day a week for this particular company. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I went into this guy. He was the CEO, and we sat down, and everything was fine. And he said, "Okay, so how much are you going to charge?" And I said, "I don't know, 900 euros a day or something like this." And he goes, "No, no, I'm not paying you that. Not paying you that. I'll give you 600." And I was I was kind of caught like a bit like the rabbit in
Uh-huh.
headlights. Um, and so I said, "Yeah, okay." And almost as soon as I came out of his office, I was regretting
Yeah.
it. And that evening, I was going to see the counselor, and came in, and I said to her, "I need to talk about this." So I started to explain what happened. And she said, "Do you know what your value is?" And we went through an exercise on that. And I said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely clear. My value is 900 a day." And she said, "Okay." So she said, "If you're in a negotiation, if your starting point is 900 and his is somewhere lower than that, you still need to get 900 in
Hmm.
value. So what you can do is, if he wants to pay you 600, you'll say, "Okay, I'll agree to 600, but what are you going to do to bridge the gap between the 600 and
Hmm.
900?" And it could be, "I'll pay you, a month in advance." It could be, "I'll guarantee you, you know, 2 weeks of work," or whatever. It doesn't even have to be an exact
Hmm.
equivalent. But once you feel like you're balancing it up, then the relationship stays on an even
Hmm.
keel. So the biggest issue with um, me just agreeing to drop to 600 was that I was putting myself below
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And the relationship after that was on that
Hmm.
level. So anyway, she said, if another piece of work comes up and he asks you to do it, um, tell him that you have to requote.
Hmm.
So about 3 weeks later, another piece of work came up that wasn't on the spec. And he asked me would I do it, and I said I'll have to requote. And he said, "But we've already agreed the rate." And I said, "No, we've agreed the rate for the other piece of
Yeah.
work." Uh, and I said it'd be 900. "No, I'm not paying. I'll pay you 600." And I said, "Okay, so what will you give me to bridge the gap?" He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you need to bridge the gap. My value is 900. The gap, you're at 600. How are we going to get there? Otherwise, I'm not doing it." And he said, "I don't know what you mean." And I said, "Well, you could pay me the full fee up front. You could guarantee that you're going to give me a minimum." And I listed off
Hmm.
3 or 4 things. So he said, "I'll pay you the fee up front." I said, "Fine." So he did, and he wrote a check for 10 grand, and he handed me the check, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I went to her the following day, and I said, "This is what happened." And she said, "He will never try that on you again." And he never did. Never
Yeah.
did. It wasn't just about the money, it was about equalizing the
Hmm.
relationship. And I that lesson is one that I've used so many times after that and taught other people about it.
Yeah.
But without knowing it,
Absolutely.
without knowing it, So why was I 40 before I knew that?
Yeah, well, I guess that's how it was supposed to be, or
Yeah, yeah,
that's how by the choices you've made, that's when it had to happen, it's I myself many times have thought the same thing, like why didn't I know that certain thing before, or when. Well, because I guess I couldn't. If like they say, if you could, you would have, But
yeah, completely, completely. And I mean, I think a lot of it as well is down to the fact that certainly for me in my 20s and 30s, it was it was more about what I would say. I was like following the pattern or following the like the train tracks.
yeah,
So you go to school, you then get to a certain point, and you either go to college or you go and get a job, and then at a certain point you meet someone, you get married, and then you have kids, and it's like as if you're on these train tracks that everyone is
yeah,
on. And then the problem is at some point in your 30s or 40s, you run out of train
hmm
tracks. It comes
and
to
now
an
what?
end. And to me, that's midlife crisis, whatever that is, because you've always followed other people's the patterns set by
Hmm.
society and other people and parents and all that. And when you get to the point that you actually have to start laying down your own
Yeah.
tracks, that's when people have the crisis because they're just not
hmm
used to it.
hmm
And certainly that's what happened to me. It When things didn't go the way that I expected to, even though I did, the right things, that was a source of real stress and anxiety for me. And it took me several years to understand what was going on.
hmm
Um, and Yeah, so that probably that piece of learning, if I could know that, that would have saved me a lot of grief
Yeah.
and stress if I'd have known that.
Yeah, and those unwritten laws, they're still on today. Like I see it all the time. The like all the things, the job, the university, the job, the kids, the wife, the house, the all of these, and you're even weird if you're not following that trend. Like like why
Absolutely,
not? Like why you don't
absolutely.
have kids at the age of 24? Well, because you are a kid at the age 24. That's why. I mean,
Absolutely,
that's why.
absolutely.
Why? I mean, but I see it like it's some kind of a race. Like uh, people younger than me already have one kid, two kids, and it's like what's the hurry? Like where are you? Is it a race or something? It's so weird how. But it's again, it's the programming. It's the unwritten laws, the society, the, the
Yeah,
we need to follow certain way of living, and if you're not following it, what's wrong with you?
yeah, yeah. Well, you're making everyone else feel uncomfortable. That's
Yeah,
usually it.
even
Yeah,
though they don't realize it, but if you look deep into
yeah,
it, that's the thing. Because
yeah, yeah, yeah. My son, who the guy who's
hmm
28 or 29 now, um, when he left college, he got the opportunity to go to France because he'd been playing music when he was in
hmm
college, and got the opportunity to go to France, work in a bar, play music, sing, all that sort of
hmm
stuff. And then 5, 6 years later, he was still doing it, except he'd moved from France and he was moving around. He was in Greece and he's now actually in
uh-huh.
Bali. Um, but every time you'd say it to people, they'd go, When's he going to come back? When's he going to get a proper job?
Yeah, it's it's funny. It's funny, and it's not so funny in the same way. But and what about the your podcast with Alexandros, which by the way I love. I always I still haven't watched the latest few episodes, but I do
Yeah.
listen all the time, and it's I really it's one of my favorites actually from I listened to a couple
Okay.
of podcasts. And how did you decide, both of you? Of course, I'm gonna talk with him as well, but how did you decide to do it?
Well, the thing there was uh, the first thing was that I think I remember. Oh yeah, I know what it was. He we were putting our various packages and offers up when we did the London
Mm-hmm.
Real course, and he was kind of ahead of the game, and he'd put together um it was a download with a video, and I went in and I took the download and the video, and then there was I think there was an opportunity to buy something for twenty
Yeah, yeah.
dollars or something like that, and so I did that, and and he came back to me, and we got sort of we were texting initially, and then we set up a call and we were chatting, and he said, "Oh, the stuff that I can help you with, in terms of the programming thing, if you're interested." So we had a couple of calls, and we kind of went one thing to another, and then I had actually been looking to start a podcast myself, and I'd done a lot of work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Had gone in and recorded an intro and outro and all that in a
Uh-huh.
studio. This would have been in October, November 2019, just before we did the London
Mm-hmm.
Real course. Um, and But when I started doing that course, I put it on ice and said I'll do it after that
Mm-hmm.
course. So that particular podcast, which I'm still going to do, is called Business Should Be
Mm-hmm.
Easy. So the idea is that business in theory is you buy, you sell,
Yeah.
etc. But should be easy. But why is it so
Yeah.
hard? So that's it. Um, and So I'd been talking about that, and then he came on one day and we were chatting, and he said that he was thinking of doing the podcast, but he was going to do it as a solo thing,
Mm-hmm.
just him talking. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think it might actually work better if someone was asking you questions. At
Oh
least
yeah.
then you could reply and answer the
Mm-hmm.
questions. It'd be easier." Because I said you might run out of steam if you're just going to talk to
Yeah, it's
yourself.
not fun. It's not that fun.
Yeah, yeah. So that was it. And then he came back to me a couple of days later, and he said, "Would you do it? Would I ask the questions?" And I said, "Yeah, fine." I said, "As long as you don't want intelligent questions. I mean, I'll just ask you what comes to mind, and we'll start and go from there, as long as it doesn't have to be too formal." Um, and that was it. So we started that. We initially started doing it. It was just audio,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then we got the idea of maybe trying to do the video as well. And We were using Zoom, and I don't know why we never thought of Skype, but we didn't. Um, and then we were using one or two others that we tried. Um, and then what we ultimately decided was we would come back to Zoom. We would record the actual conversation on
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, but separately we would record higher definition video and audio by so what I do is I have my SLR set up to record into QuickTime, and it records into
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. And then I've got my microphone, which records into my phone, a separate audio
Yeah.
track. And then I download the Zoom recording, the QuickTime audio video, and the audio track, and I send it off to
Yeah.
him, and then he puts the two
Yeah. Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
He does the
Yeah.
wizardry. So that was it. But we've just kept going. I mean, we decide what we're going to talk about probably 10 minutes before we
Uh-huh.
start. Sometimes he'll text me and go, I was thinking of this, let's do that. And then we'll have a conversation. Okay, so what angle are we coming at it from? And
Mhm.
it's usually just the opening question that um we get,
Mhm.
and then we just go from there. Um,
Mhm.
and that's it. It's just good fun.
It is, and it's good stuff. I mean, it's I'm not saying, that it's one of my favorite just because it's yours. It's really the
Yeah,
stuff that
sure.
you're talking about are many. Sometimes I don't even hear them in other podcasts that I listen to, for one
Sure.
reason or another. But it especially because he's really uh, knowledgeable on the subject of programming and all those,
Yeah,
and nowadays I see this is such a huge issue today, the programming, and the fact that so few people actually even realize that they're a subject to that thing,
yeah,
that such a
yeah.
thing exists, that there is such a thing as programming, and that we are all subject to it. But and and it drives people's lives. Many, or like he says, most people,
Everybody's,
most people.
well, everybody. I mean, everybody's life is running on some kind of programs. It's really a question of, are you running on good programs? Are you running on bad
Yeah,
programs?
and
And a lot of the time, the bad ones that are the what you would describe as bad programs now were actually good when you put them in
hmm
place, because they were serving a purpose to keep you safe,
yeah,
or like even the simple one, your parents telling you not to talk to
yeah,
strangers. So you do that, and that keeps you safe when you're a kid. But then you go in and get a job in sales, and you're afraid to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger,
yeah.
and you don't know why. That's a simple version of it. But then you have all of the stuff that comes through media, and that's the insidious
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
That's nasty. Even something as simple as, I remember the one about, people talk about the 10,000 steps. The importance of 10,000 steps. Try get your
Uh-huh.
10,000 steps. I saw on a program a couple of years ago that's actually, that was made up by a Japanese company that had put together. It wasn't even a technology thing, but it was a little gadget for recording the number of steps that you were
Yeah.
taking as you were walking
hmm
along. And they decided randomly that 10,000 steps a day was the figure. All of a sudden, 10,000 steps are really important.
Oh, just it it's so funny because you see that everywhere, like everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And the more you try to learn about it, and see and find your own programming, and then from that learn about other people's programming and all that, the more you get into the subject, the more frequently you see it everywhere. Like it's really
Yeah.
absolutely everywhere in everything.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, the way that, the hobby horses of mine would be around
hmm
food. Um, the idea, I stopped eating meat and dairy 5, 6 years ago, purely from a health point of view, when I started to learn about some of the stuff that was going on with that stuff in
hmm
my body, in particular the dairy. And like the idea that, because you'd been fed this message for years that, milk is good for bones, for strong
Yeah.
bones. I mean, when people find out that I don't eat it, they ask me, well, what do you do for protein, and what do you do for calcium for your bones, and stuff. And it's, if you actually looked it up, you'll find that dairy actually strips the calcium out of your
Yeah.
bones. because it creates an acidic reaction that the calcium needs to come in to
Mm-hmm.
counteract. So many different messages that are put out like that, and just accepted that that's the way it is. When people are faced with, um, I mean, I mentioned earlier about the blood pressure and me not doing the
Mm-hmm.
medication. I mean, the bizarre conversation that I remember having with my GP about, your blood pressure's high, and what happens if you keel over, what am I going to tell your family? And I'm kind of going, well, don't worry about it. Well, if you took this medication. And I said, but if you look at the list of potential effects,
Side
side
effects, yeah.
effects of taking that medication, one of them is death. I said, you're giving me something here to save me from keeling over, but actually could kill me. Um, and when I said, do I want to find out what's behind my high blood pressure? And he goes, we don't know the reason. We just have to accept it.
Ah,
And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but that's
he's
not for me. I'd rather find out and try and do something about it, even if I'm just do it by trial and error along the way. So again, even the GPs buy into the idea that the advertisers are predominantly pushing out. So whether the advertisers of medications and pharmaceuticals or food,
mm-hmm.
everyone buys into it. So I think the main theme that has emerged from our podcast is, live your own life as well as you possibly can, question everything, be curious about
Mm-hmm.
everything, and don't take what people, accepted wisdom, as it were, and just accept it and go with it. I mean, question it. Um, and certainly don't take most things that you see on media as true,
For sure.
especially not in the news.
For sure, yeah. That I even uh, nowadays I even sometimes say that if everyone is doing something or likes something or is into something, I usually stay away from that thing.
Do the opposite. Do the
Yeah,
opposite. Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
it's just observation. It's not the right thing. And about the doctors and the GPs, they're not. I said that to many people. They're not taught to cure you. They're taught to sell
yeah,
the drugs. They
yeah,
because during the, let's say, during the weekend, they go to some kind of a team building with the people from the pharmaceutical companies, and they're
yeah,
mingling together, and they're having dinners and all that.
yeah,
For what? Because they need their medications to be sold to people.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a very long topic that they don't even uh, they have like 5 minutes to to find out what's wrong with you, and you don't even have the time to actually say everything that's wrong with you, because you want to say everything that you feel, so he can accordingly diagnose you with something. And they don't even wait for you to finish. They're already writing. You're mid sentence, they're already writing. And yeah, just take that
yeah,
2-3 times a day, this much.
yeah. And even I think even those that, even if they're not going to those
Mm-hmm.
conferences and they're not pushing those drugs, the thing is the way that they're
Mm-hmm.
trained
Mm-hmm.
limits their ability to actually provide let's call it a holistic
Yeah.
solution, or even consider it, that food might be the issue, or lifestyle might be the
Mm-hmm.
issue. They might say you're overweight, but they don't really look into, you know, what your lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
is. So, um, and as I said, if the only tool you're taught to use is a hammer, then everything looks like a
Yeah.
nail.
Yeah.
And that's really it is with them. So the idea that I've had people with, who are on courses and stuff, therapies who've had, lumps disappear that they had been told, breast cancer
Mm-hmm.
type things. And and their solution is, or their answer is, oh, we must have made a mistake the
Yeah,
first time.
because we cannot
So
be wrong,
so even though you've got mammograms or you've got scans or whatever which show it, and then it's not there, we must have made a mistake because they don't even accept the fact that actually something
Yeah,
else might have impacted
because
this.
they are never wrong,
So
because it's not us, it's
no,
not us,
no,
it's
no, but
something we made a mistake or something wasn't right. It's not that we misdiagnosed or it's not that you can actually heal that if we want to go there with the power of your thought. The Dr. Joe
yeah,
Dispenza's work. There's plenty of cases
yeah,
in his books, in his seminars and podcasts I've listened to him. People walking out of with wheelchairs, and they just stand
yeah,
up and start walking, and they're throwing their canes and crutches and all that. Final stage cancer disappears like from
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
and no
yeah.
one they don't want to talk about that. It's
Not only do they not want to talk about it, but I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I did see a documentary a few years ago, and part of it, I can't remember, it was something about
mm-hmm,
cancer, and it was an 8 or 9 part
mm-hmm,
documentary or series of documentaries that were put out, and the first 1 or 2 episodes talked about the the history of basically Western
mm-hmm,
medicine and how it had evolved and come to where it is now. And what I didn't know was that apparently it was Rockefeller, Carnegie,
yeah,
the 3 or 4 main
mm-hmm,
guys. Um, at that point in time, there was something like 150 what you would describe as homeopathic and alternative type hospitals in the
mm-hmm,
US. And what happened at the start of the last century was these guys got together, they started the businesses of producing
mm-hmm.
pharmaceuticals. They then paid universities to change their courses in order to teach the what effectively is the current syllabus, which is that you cut it out, you burn it out, or you use
Mm-hmm.
medication. And the doctors were basically taught to just diagnose and
Yeah,
prescribe. And in order to protect them, they then lobbied Congress or the Senate
mm-hmm,
or whatever to outlaw anyone who didn't have a license which was coming from one of the medical schools. That so no one can claim to be any kind of a doctor in the
yeah,
states unless they've gone through that medical system. That's why everyone has to go to New Mexico and places like this down in South
yeah,
America, if they want to do any kind of
mm-hmm,
alternative treatments.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So they basically set this up in order to fit their own thing, and yet this is continuing like 100 years later. They're still
yeah,
at it, and nobody questions it.
yeah. And the same goes with their other areas of expertise, quote unquote, like the oils and the banking system, of course.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember I watched on some or heard on some podcast that I think in the U.S. In the medical university and the whole I don't know, is it 5 or how many years, the whole education, they have something like 2% from it that talks about nutrition, about food.
Oh, my
Mm-hmm.
son, when he was in college, was he was in town one day, and I don't know, they'd gone for drinks, and they came out of the pub. They went into
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's, as you do, and he went into McDonald's, and McDonald's was full. So they sit down at this kind of booth, himself and his friend, and there were 2 guys sitting across from
Mm-hmm.
them, and they were final year medical students in Trinity College here
Mm-hmm.
in Dublin. And so Peter knew a bit about this stuff at this stage, and they got into a
Hmm.
conversation. And they said that they had, in the whole of the 5 years, they'd had 3 hours of a lecture on, or lectures on nutrition.
This is just mind blowing for me. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. But I mean, it is, but it's not, because if you that they their point is not to have them to for the doctors to
No,
have that knowledge. The point is to,
no.
like we said, prescribe, prescribe, prescribe. And
Yeah, yeah. And in fairness, there are a number of doctors, and I follow a number of them online who say promote plant-based
mhm,
diets and all that sort of stuff. And they because they've gone and done their own
yeah.
research, and they've gone beyond the prescribing medication. Um, but and that's why, given the nature of what these guys are in, like I consider it an obligation to actually keep informed by reading stuff about mind and, improving yourself and nutrition, and so that when I'm sitting in front of a
Yeah.
client, I know what I'm doing, and I can offer them something new, or new thinking on it. I think there's a lot of these guys, possibly they're overworked, but I think there's a lot of them just lazy,
Hmm.
and they um take their instruction over the 5 6 years. Then they come out, and then they tick the box for their CPD education every
Yeah.
year, probably by turning up at one of those pharmaceutical um, junket things that
Yeah.
that you mentioned earlier, and that's
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah.
mean that they don't update their knowledge for, they just,
No, and they don't search beyond the realms of what they're taught. They don't start looking
yeah, yeah.
into, well, what impact has lifestyle got, food,
Hmm.
whatever. They don't prescribe even stuff like CBD
Hmm.
oil and that sort of stuff, other than in very specific cases. But that's because people lobbied for it,
Yeah,
to finally get it done.
absolutely. Yeah, it's true, and it's but the good thing is that thanks to the internet and its almighty power and spreading,
Yes.
now slowly but surely, in my opinion, people are starting to get uh, the other point of view, the other side of the coin, and that the fact that there is something else that you can do, that food is actually really really important, and it
Yeah.
is important what kind of food you're eating, where it comes from as well. All those things that, if we were like, I don't know, maybe 20 or so years ago, and there was no podcast, no, all those things, you're screwed. There's no way you can find out about that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely. Absolutely. And the effects of it are actually been
yeah.
felt. I mean, we're in a situation now where, have with the life expectancy having increased as it is now, we're now in a situation where technically my kid's life expectancy is likely to be less
Uh-huh.
than mine,
Yeah.
because and that's a
Yeah, yeah.
generalization. But that's essentially it. They're saying it started to reverse because they landed right in the middle of all of this shit food,
Mhm.
basically, and takeaways and you know frozen foods, packaged foods, all that sort of stuff. At least when I was growing up, there was, potatoes were cooked and carrots were cooked,
Yeah.
and yes, there was meat, etc. as well, but there was nothing taken out of a tin other than peas or something like that,
Yeah.
occasionally. But yeah, the fact that so much stuff is pre-packaged now is such a big problem, and it's not a question of obesity; it's a question of just ill
Mhm.
health generally based on what people are eating. So no, it's a big issue. It's a
And
big
also
issue.
people wanting to make more and more money for,
Oh,
on the back
completely,
of the
completely.
population, basically.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it takes
absolutely.
just a short glimpse into just the history of food, even to see that uh, up until maybe 80 to 100 years ago, there was none of those illnesses and diseases that we have now today.
Absolutely.
It,
Absolutely. Sure, 50 years ago, your chance of getting cancer was something like 1 in 4, one in
hmm
five. Now it's one
Yeah,
in two.
and but no, it's not a surprise if when you as you because you mentioned McDonald's earlier. Back when I was in the UK, that's the the during the lockdowns and when they actually let the fast food chains open. I don't know when it was. It was like full of people in there, like full packed. There was lines with the drive on the
Yeah.
drive-throughs. It was like a first McDonald's has opened ever, like in that town.
Yeah. 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 I know we had it. We had it
Yeah.
here. There's one up the road here, about 10 minutes away, and the queue was basically halfway down the road. It's bizarre.
And I'm wondering,
And,
is it a lack of information or is it a total apathy and I don't care and I'm gonna eat something?
I think it's the thing that I found with this was that when I started looking at, whether it was psychology or whether it was nutrition or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, only when I started looking did I start to run into and engage with people who were also looking, and suddenly I knew people who were thinking and looking at the same
Yeah.
stuff. But until I did that, I was engaging with people who were thinking like
Yeah.
I was. So I think when you're on a path like this, you tend to just meet the people, and then you think that everyone else is learning and they're getting to know this. But the reality is that you're still with the group who are at the tip of the
Yeah. Yeah.
iceberg, and that 90% are still buying the crap stuff. And all you got to look at, like you look at these sports events, you look at Champions League and it's sponsored by, Coca-Cola and McDonald's and
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. I mean, it's just peddling poison.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm optimistic just because of, as I mentioned, because of the internet and the all those podcasts and hopefully books. I hope people read books because
Well,
it's good.
I think the thing is that I think I would say that I started to look and deviate off my probably sleep
Hmm.
walking that I was doing up until my early 40s, because I hit a crisis point,
Hmm.
and then rather than just patch up the crisis point, I don't know, just because I was um, inclined to do it, I then started looking more and more. And I think there are people who do that. I think there's other people who, when they hit a crisis point, they just want it fixed, and then they go back to the way they were before.
Hmm.
Um, there's certainly the opportunity for people to learn more.
Oh yeah.
There's the opportunity for them to take
Hmm.
responsibility. But unfortunately, I think with the programming that has been going on for years, there's just there's still too many people at this stage who are just sleepwalking along
Hmm.
and um, buying into the idea that if this was really as bad as it is for me, why would someone be selling it? It's And I mean, then you go, well, what about cigarettes? I mean, they were selling cigarettes, and doctors were even promoting smoking,
Eh,
until somebody kept fighting and fighting and fighting in order to open the whole thing up. And then all of a sudden, cigarettes are bad for you and everybody
yeah.
knows about it. But up until that point, nobody was particularly commenting on it. So I think there are still a huge number of people who Unfortunately, because of a lack of consciousness and a lack of awareness and a lack of a sense of personal
Hmm.
responsibility, personal power, um, they just keep walking along. And if you come out with something different, they want to either push you away or they want to get change your mind to drag you in.
Yeah. Y-
And that's the problem. And they've got media on their side, they've got the general society messaging on their
Yeah.
side, and it's kind of hard um, to go against the masses. But hopefully people will start to learn because people are just going to keep getting
Hmm.
sick, and they're going to get sicker and sicker sooner and
Yeah.
sooner.
And we saw what happened with the current situation. In from my view, what I've noticed is that uh, it's not that the healthy people do not get sick or anything, but it's the difference in how they get through it is huge with
Yeah,
with the other people who have underlying conditions or diabetes or whatever else. it's
yeah,
it's here, and of course it's a totally different topic that we don't get the actual real information about it and the real numbers and all that. But from, let's say, my close circle or even a bit further, I see that usually people who don't take care of themselves, they are the ones either catching it, or with them it's much worse.
yeah,
So,
yeah, completely, completely.
and hopefully that's my, I hope that that this thing made people to actually pay a bit more attention to their health, and not, but
Yeah,
we'll
I'm not so hopeful. I'm not so hopeful
we'll
because like even the messaging, you would think that um, in order to encourage people to take better care of themselves, that there'd be more clarity around, well, what do I need to do to improve my immune
Mhm.
system? What should I be doing? Um, but but no, I mean the way the whole thing has been built up is that everyone gets into the frenzy that they want to take the vaccine, and so when we have the vaccine, everything will be
Yeah.
back to normal, and then and that's the message, and that's the belief that everybody has, and that's the way everything has been whipped up and people have been
Mhm.
corralled, and because there's no questioning of it, um, because people don't take the time to question. They're just going along with it, and they've been almost pushed into a place that they're
Mhm.
exhausted at this
Yeah.
point, and they just, oh, look, just give it to me. I want to be able to get in a
Yeah.
plane and go to Spain, wherever it may be.
Yeah.
And that's it. Nobody questions. And when I've had conversations with people where they've said, and like they'll talk about even getting the vaccine, and I'll say nothing, and then they'll go, "So you're going to take the vaccine, aren't you?" No. I go, well, why not? Like, unless everyone takes it, then everyone's going to be, nobody's, like, we won't be protected. And I said, well, I'm going to take my chances. And my understanding is that even if I get the vaccine, that I'll still be able to pass it on to other people. So I'm not protecting anybody else by actually taking it. Um, but there's this, again, the narrative has been built up that it's, if everyone doesn't take it, then the people who don't, you're been a bad citizen,
Yeah.
and, and you're going to make it bad for the rest of us. And that's how it's all been built up towards that. So
And I always want to ask
yeah,
the people who would like to take it and all that, if you, sir, are taking it and you are supposedly protected, why do you want me to take it? Like, are you afraid for
yes,
my life,
exactly,
or what's the big deal here? Like, you're
exactly.
it's
That's exactly the point. It's exactly the
like,
point. If everyone who hasn't got it is happy to take their chances,
yeah,
what's the
yeah. I
problem?
mean,
Yeah. Um. So anyway, but it's just part of I don't like I read stuff and I don't know about the you know the bigger the 1% and all that
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff. I just know from working in the large corporate environments.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that strikes me, and we talked about it a few weeks ago on the podcast. This, I don't know if you remember the Milgram experiment, the one where the guy was sitting with the electric shock.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did you see that? So this was the guy. They ran this experiment in the 1960s because one of a psychiatrist or a psychologist wanted to understand why it was that German people, went along with a lot of the stuff that the Nazis wanted them
Mm-hmm.
to do, and they just did what they were
Yeah.
told. And so he set this thing up where he brought this guy in and he had this gadget in front of him with a dial
Mm-hmm.
on it. And a guy in a white coat stood there and he said, "Now, what I want you to do is I want you to turn this dial, and that's going to administer an electric shock to someone who's sitting in a room next door." Now, you didn't see the person next door.
Yeah.
And then he'd turn it up and you wouldn't hear anything. Then turn it up a bit more and the guy go, "Oh!" And as he went up, he went a bit further, and then the guy'd say, "But I'm hurting him." And the guy in the white coat would say, "No, no, no, it's fine. Just keep going, just keep going." And some people did and went all the way up to administer, whatever it was, 400 watts of electricity. They weren't obviously, but they were been made to feel like they were.
Uh-huh.
And there was a guy screaming and roaring in the room
Uh-huh.
next door, and they were trying to establish how many people would be influenced by someone in a white coat, someone in
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
authority, telling them to do something.
Yeah.
And there was only something like 15 or 20% of the people questioned it. The rest of the people just did it, and they went ahead and administered the full dose, technically. And his conclusion of it was that people are, as individuals, are very good at heart and they want to do the right thing, but bring them into a situation like a large organization or a company or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and you say to them, "You need to do this," they do
Yeah.
it. So that's why we have the banking frauds. That's why we have the problems with Volkswagen changing the diesel readings, and the all of these things.
Yeah.
People just do it because they're in the situation, and so therefore, all you need is one guy at the top
Mm-hmm.
who is saying, "We need to improve the numbers this quarter so that I get my bonus. Therefore, we're going to, you know, we're going to send out a vaccine without properly checking it or
Yeah.
testing it, or we're going to send out a batch of food of some sort without somebody checking it." Um, that's all you need. And then you've got a bunch of people who will then just do what they're
Mm-hmm.
told. So, having worked in those environments, I can see how that happens, and I saw how it happened as well. And for me, that's one of the drivers of this. As I said, I don't know much about the 1% bit, but certainly I know that when
Mm-hmm.
people are put into those group situations, they will do bad things, especially when they can't see the people that they're doing the bad things
Yeah.
to.
Uh, Similar to the internet trolling, and
Yes, yes,
also the doctors who were doing in I think it was in New York or somewhere, the doctors that were doing the fake tests and all those things, they were just told, and when they I even saw like a hidden camera video of someone, and the person asked him like, why, what are you doing here? Well, we were just told to be here and to do this and do that, and especially to do those things when the crew come, the recording, with the cameras and all that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
basically they were just exactly what you said. They were told something and they just did it, and that's it. No
yeah,
questions asked.
yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I guess there were
yeah,
many people are actually um, grown to do that, and by grown I mean grown in like from those same 1% who just grows their garden with whatever they need. And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
uh,
So we just need to plow on, and I think, as I say, that's our idea is in the podcast is to talk about, take responsibility and question
mhm.
things and be curious and don't take things just because you read them or see them on the media or any of that sort of stuff. Satisfy yourself.
Yeah,
And if it doesn't look right, then don't do it.
exactly. Yeah, and I really hope more and more people actually take the time to listen to podcasts like yours, and I'm my mine is with similar goal as well, to actually
Mm.
maybe show a different point of view on some topics that I might have some experience with, or my guest, or if I got the information from books or from somewhere. It's the point is to spread the word and
Yeah,
just have more people actually, like you said, ask questions, and not just follow the orders from from above.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. And I think the other danger is that, like, when people start to get into groups, like you see, you know, what was going on in America, and then people taking sides in the world. It's almost like when you try to align yourself with
Hmm.
groups, that can actually be contaminating as
Absolutely.
well. It's really you're the one who is sovereign and you're the one who needs to look after yourself. And if you do the right thing by yourself, you're probably going to influence a few more
Hmm.
people, or they'll see what you're doing. And that's the best way to move things forward. Rather than getting involved in either side of the argument. Just do what you think is
Yeah, the
right.
tribalism is another. I see it's another problem as well, because people like to be in a team. You spoke
Yeah,
about that in I think more than one episode of your podcast about exactly that,
yeah,
the tribalism, the us versus them. It's, which for me is again it's not the right path. I mean, you can still be have difference of opinion and be friends, and you can still
yeah,
be vegan and be friends with a carnivore person, and it doesn't have to be separation. There's no need of that. That's something that will not lead us to as we can see, actually, to a good place.
yeah. I mean, I don't. To me, what I choose to do is just a personal choice, and I wouldn't
Yeah,
try to convert anybody
yeah,
else.
of course.
That's it.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, well, we'll see how it's we live in interesting times, for sure.
We do,
For
we
sure.
do, we do.
I'm curious, even though sometimes many people uh see the situation and they're just like, oh, it's crazy, the end of the world, who knows what's gonna happen, aliens are probably next, which probably they are,
Mm.
I mean. but
Yeah,
but still, it's still interesting, and we'll see where everything will lead us, hopefully to maybe a good place. And
yeah. And I think ultimately we have personal responsibility to make the best of whatever situation we
mhm,
have. And if we know that that's the case, then we're more likely to do well
mhm,
in it. But if we feel that we're in some way victims, or something is being done to us,
yeah,
then that's not a good place. And
yeah.
we've given our power away at that stage. And so therefore, um, hanging on to your own power and managing your situation is to give you the best possible outcome is for me the only way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree on that. And well, I guess where can do you have like a website, or something that people can, if somebody.
Yeah, well, I do. My website is
Mhm,
vincentbyrne.ie. It's my business one. I got it redesigned there just before Christmas, and it still needs some tweaking. Um, but it's almost there. And on various social media, I think I'm Vincent Byrne Coach
Mhm.
on Facebook and Vincent Byrne Coach on Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, I did my 366-day challenge last year where I was
That
posting.
was amazing.
I'm
Yeah.
now this month of January, I've just been completely exhausted and that I was taking the time off not having to do
Yeah.
it. So I'm probably going to start posting again from tomorrow, but I won't do it every day, and I'll only do it as I feel like
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
it. Um, but yeah, any of those places, you'll find me. I'm on LinkedIn somewhere as well, with Vincent
Yeah.
Byrne
And
too.
Burn is Byrne. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Byrne. Pronounced Burn, but
Uh huh.
this is an Irish spelling.
Yeah. And also for the podcast enthusiasts, Your Mind is Trying to Kill You podcast. I
Yeah,
highly
yeah,
recommend it to anyone who likes to ask questions, who is interested in the out of the box stuff and programming and everything. It's definitely you can take a lot of. I almost always take something from some episodes and almost from in each of them. There's always some little gem. There's humor as well there. So if people
yeah,
want to follow it, again, Your Mind is Trying to Kill You. It's on Spotify, YouTube as well, Apple Podcasts. Yeah,
yeah,
all
yeah.
the
All the usual.
platforms.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for your time. It was awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Me
Uh,
too. Me too.
and for our listeners, as I said, you can find Vincent in all social medias. If you need coaching on your business or starting or progressing with it, um, and yeah, if you want to add something, I mean,
No, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed the chat, and it's it's always good to to share ideas, and that's what I'm
yeah.
about. So I love doing this, and it's been a great pleasure to get the opportunity to do it with you. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Me too. It was a great pleasure and privilege. And as I said, I don't know if I said it, but I've said it before to you that your podcast was like an inspiration to for me to start finally mine. So it's uh,
Yeah,
that's why it was a pleasure to do it. And I'll soon hopefully we'll chat with the other
yeah. Well, he's the main
yeah.
man. He's the main man.
Yeah. Okay then. Thank you again very much for your time.
Not at all.
It and
Yeah.
I'll with the people who are listening, we'll hear or see each other next week again. And have a good day, good night, or whatever you're listening from. Until next time. Bye bye.